The Force Awakens. And so I hadn't watched it in probably about a month. And so, again, Friday I sat down and said, I'm just going to sit down and watch this movie. And another reason, and just a side note, it's Star Wars related, another reason why I hadn't watched it in a while is because I got Star Wars Battlefront, and I love that game. I know a lot of people complain because there's no campaign or storyline in it, but for a gamer like me, it's perfect to be able to sit down and wipe out playing the squadron, the fighter squadron games. I can play that for hours on end. So I sat down and watched The Force Awakens, and probably it was one of the most enjoyable experiences that I had had watching it, apart from the first few times I'd seen it in the theater. And I thought about it, and I finally realized what it was that I enjoyed so much. I don't know if it was the distance that I had, because I hadn't watched it in about a month, and I'd been just so surrounded by The Force Awakens for such a long period of time last year leading up to its release, and then its release, and all the, 10 times I saw it in the theater, I guess, or something like this. Not to mention the bootleg copy that I got that I watched over and over again. But I sat down and I watched it. I mean, I watched it. I didn't put anything on my lap. I didn't put my iPad next to me. No, actually, I take that back. My iPad was next to me. Usually I have my iPad and my phone near my throne, if you will, in front of my TV, my whole movie setup. I usually keep that right there next to me, and I didn't touch it. I didn't check out my phone. There was one moment where I had to answer an email that came over. I paused the movie for about 10 minutes, took care of that, and got back to it. Wish I hadn't done that. I just sat down and watched it, and just enjoyed every single visually delicious moment of that film. And it got me thinking that there's something about going to a theater and not having any options. There's something about going into a theater, sitting down in those chairs, the lights going down, the expectation that people around you are going to shut the hell up. No one's going to look at their screen, and then you're just look at their screens, their phones, right? And they're just going to focus on the screen and take the story in. You know, that's what always made watching movies so special to me. I would go, when I was single, I would go out every single Friday, friend or no friend, and a lot of times it was no friends. I go every single Friday to the movies after work, every single Friday. Whatever the big movie was that weekend, I would go and watch it. And I remember thinking just how, and this was, I had a TV and a VCR at home. I didn't have DVDs yet, and a small little 19-inch TV. But at the time, you couldn't get that. You couldn't get that uniqueness you get at the movie theater. And, as we progress and we get DVDs and bigger TVs and Blu-rays and even bigger TVs, and I've got a setup that I have that at home. It really isn't all that special. I mean, I got a nice big TV. I think it's a 60. I've got a good 5.1 surround sound system and a Blu-ray player and my gaming consoles and everything else. It's a better setup than I ever expected to have when I was growing up. And it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. But it doesn't replace or substitute going to the movies. And I think for a while there, you get it in your mind that it's going to. And I found myself spending time on the iPad watching a film at parts that I just perceived as boring. And don't misunderstand, this isn't me saying you can't do that. It's nice to be able to throw a movie in the background and get work done on the iPad and just have something running. But if you're going to sit down and watch the movie, I think we do ourselves a massive disservice by not just sitting down and watching the movie. When I create something for my radio show, whether it's a comedy bit, or I'm putting together a mashup of a song and hearing. I do a lot of this on my show. I did music radio for the first half of my career, mornings and afternoon shows on rock stations, music stations, and then the second half of my career, I'm going on year 20 here, which is amazing. I've been doing talk radio, but I took a lot of what I learned doing a rock radio and translated it over into the talk radio world. So I like to have a level of humor, a big level, a high energy level of humor on my show. Not cheesy. I just want it to be entertaining. I don't want to just drone on about how much I don't like this politician or that politician needs to go to jail over things like Benghazi and bleh. Okay, I need to have some fun with it. And I get depressed when I do a show, like when I had to do Monday's show in the wake of what happened in Orlando. I was depressed when I got home. I just was like, oh, this is just bumming me out, and I don't want to be like that. And the next day, I took a different take on it. I pointed out the ridiculousness about the overreaction. My point of that is, when I create something, I'm thinking about every single element, every single detail. I want the audio placed in the right spot as it relates to the song that I'm putting it over to, so it hits the right tone and comedic element. That's nothing close to what these directors do, and specifically what Star Wars directors do when crafting a movie, and certainly not with The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is a film that was made with love. I don't mean to get cheesy on it, but it was. You know, J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy, Lawrence Kasdan, when they said they wanted to delight, that was their only rule, you know that they went over every single moment of that movie to make sure that it was exactly what they wanted to present, whether it was in terms of story, emotion, excitement, relating it to the older films. And I almost feel like sometimes when we actually go to watch a movie, but we find ourselves distracted by everything else, we don't get the enjoyment out of that film that maybe we thought we should have. It's probably not the film's fault. It's probably our fault. And look, I don't mean to make it more serious than it is. I mean, I'm doing a Star Wars podcast, for crying out loud. But to me, it is important because I respect that art, and I do want to be entertained. And I found myself watching The Force Awakens going, man, the last couple times I watched this movie, I didn't really watch it. I did. I watched the parts that I liked, but I was distracted by other things. I didn't allow myself to get into the stories and to be immersed in the world that was created. You know, and I can't help but wonder, and this is just a theory, and it's probably way off the mark, and there's no way to ever quantify this whatsoever, but I wonder how much the prequels suffered because of exactly what I'm talking about. Just think about this for just a moment, and there's probably no truth to this at all, but let me just present this idea. You know, the prequels, when they were released, I remember very, very distinctly, I bought a 4-head VCR back in 1999 when I was living here in Tucson because I got the widescreen VHS special edition copy of The Phantom Menace. And I wanted it in the best quality that I could possibly have for my little 19-inch TV screen. And it was shortly after that I ended up getting the DVD. And then Attack of the Clones ended up being the first Star Wars movie that I ever purchased for the first time on DVD. And then, of course, Revenge of the Sith, coming a few years later. But given the fact that home theater systems were becoming more affordable, better quality, right around the time when all those prequels were released, I just wonder how much, if any, the negativity towards the prequels comes from the fact that people don't sit down and just watch them. Just sit down and watch them. The Phantom Menace, it's a good movie. Look, even if most people can't stand Jar Jar. And even I remember the first time I saw the movie, I was a bit of a Jar Jar apologist. I just put it to the side. I can tune him out now. I mean, it doesn't bother me when he shows up on screen. But you watch that movie play out, it's a really, really fun, enjoyable film. There's some good sequences in that movie. The pod race, the end lightsaber battle. Attack of the Clones is arguably one of the richest films, Star Wars films, as it just relates to what they were doing. The technology wasn't quite there, and I won't go there because I know I've gone there on other podcasts. The technology wasn't quite there as it relates to the CGI work, but they were trying. But you watch those films from beginning to end, George Lucas put those together with care. And they are really fun movies. I would challenge you that if you're not the biggest prequel fan, sit down and just pick whichever one you like the most. Or maybe go the other way. Pick whichever one you like the least, if it's The Phantom Menace. And just sit down and just watch it. Don't distract. it's really cool. My 13-year-old Logan being on summer break, it's become like the summer of movies. I'm a little bit jealous, to be honest with you. I got to go to bed early. I get into bed about 7 o'clock every single night. And, he'll stay up because he's older. And, my 9-year-old will go to sleep and he'll stay up and watch movies. And it's been kind of fun because every morning when I get up at 2:30 and I'm out the door sometime between 4 and 4:30. And I'll walk through the living room and I can see which movies that they've had out because the boxes are out. And I'll look and I'll go, oh, hey, he watched The Island the other night. That's an odd one. I didn't think he would pick that. And they ended up watching The Breakfast Club. And so it's been really cool to talk to him later on. But my son, when we go to watch movies, Logan, there's 2 lights in the living room. There's a sort of a tall lamp that's to the right of the TV in the corner, and then there's a more of a regular desktop lamp on this end table to the right of where I sit. It's not as bright. He will go and turn off the taller, brighter lamp for the room and just leave on the smaller light to dim the lights in the room. And we've gotten to the point now where we're telling each other to put the iPads and everything else away and let's just watch this movie. And it's a better experience. Sort of forcing yourself to create that movie atmosphere because that's what makes the movies going to the theater, so special. So that's the commentary that I have on that. Let's move into some news items and a little bit of commentary on people revisiting The Force Awakens.
The dark side.
So let's go here first. Since we were talking about it, I've heard several different hosts on other podcasts talk about how in revisiting The Force Awakens, they just don't like it. And I disagree. Most of it comes back to them feeling like the movie is just a really expensive, well-done fan film. Well, pretty much every single Star Wars movie moving forward that isn't directed by George Lucas could be classified that way. But the arguments that they have watching it, and this is just me personally, and then we'll get on to just a few news items. The argument that it reminds them too much of the other movies, it's too much of a ripoff of the other films, the other original trilogy movies. I just don't see that. I don't watch The Force Awakens and think I'm watching a redo or a reboot of A New Hope. All those films echo each other. The only time when I stop to think about it for just a moment is maybe when they do the little trench run towards the end on Starkiller Base. But even then, all you got to do is think back to Return to the Jedi and the battle on the second Death Star, and it's the same, refrain again, right? The pod race as it relates to the speeder bike chase. I mean, I could do this all night, comparing and contrasting. Now, I'll grant you that The Force Awakens has more of those sort of, whereas the other movies kind of related direct on a one-on-one level, The Force Awakens relates to the original trilogy on a 1-on-3 level. There's a little bit of all 3 movies in The Force Awakens, but as I've talked about at length in previous podcasts, that's what they were designed to do. They needed to go backwards to go forwards, and that's what they did. But when I watch the movie, I don't see that. There is enough uniqueness and just enough unique moments and differences in The Force Awakens that it doesn't. There's at no point does the movie. Do I get taken out of the film because I'm thinking about a different Star Wars movie, unless I'm thinking about as it relates to the storyline. Watching Kylo Ren and thinking about how much he wants to emulate Darth Vader, I think of that now. And it's fun watching it over and over again because you end up sort of picking up on other things and other parts of the film that become, little tiny moments that become just so enjoyable. And I'll give you one, and then we'll move on to some news items. But there's a moment when Kylo Ren and General Hux early in the film are arguing. Kylo Ren makes that comment of maybe we should go with Supreme Leader Snoke's idea of a clone army. And that line, you know what? I mean, for me being a prequel fan, just being able to relate in that moment to that movie It's one of those moments in the film where I really, really enjoy it. And everybody's entitled to their opinion. As it relates to The Force Awakens, I think right now a lot of people are